applause and everything already. That's awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate getting a chance to come talk to you folks a little bit about some of the thoughts and processes we have about freshmen on campus. My story is a little bit grew up in the Seattle area, worked for the North Shore school system. Predominantly most of my 9 years of teaching at one level was junior high, and then I moved into the high school level. And I worked at Woodinville High School for a year. I've also been at Inglemoor High School. Both of those are high achieving. One is kind of a predominantly AP program, that's Woodinville High School. The other one is predominantly IB program. So come with some background experience about advanced students and advanced programs. And then really desperately wanted to skip the stage of being an assistant and move straight to being a principal. So I went to Omak, Washington, which is in north central Washington, about an hour north of Wenatchee, hour and a half. And brought with that lots of unique experiences working with the student population on an Indian reservation, and the diverse needs of our students were very much focused on the struggling learner, very much how we're going to get kids to stay in school. Lots of different dynamics I dealt with that were quite a bit different than some of the experiences I had in the two previous schools I had worked at before. So when I started to look for work, I was looking for a very particular niche that I was interested in. I wanted to find something that kind of helped me address the skills I had learned with the struggling learners, and also the focus I had for the advanced learners. And with those two models, you learn a lot about what to do with the middle student, what I call the kind of the middle of the bell curve, and how we address that. So part of the concept of the Freshman Learning Campus is we really want to try and figure out how we can get more students into our advanced programs. So some of the things I did is really looked at Mount Si and what were some of the strengths of Mount Si. Mount Si is a fantastic high school with a rather poor reputation. And it's unfortunate because I've been in really top performing high schools, and I can tell you, without just being biased now that I'm a principal, that it does some really amazing things, and it has growth far superior than many of the high schools we're often compared to. Many of the schools that parents that call me and saying, we're thinking about sending our school to this place, you know, people really spent the time to look at who's growing. They'd see some dramatic changes about what Mount Si is accomplishing. So one of the things I've been doing over the last few months is working with the school board and talking a little bit about a vision of opening a freshman-specific campus. And largely, I'll show you some statistics of why that's our focus, but it's the hardest population to get done right. And if you don't get that done right, that's typically where you see large numbers of freshmen disappear. So most schools are really good about kind of brushing things under the rug, but many people don't step back and go, gee, most schools enter 500 freshmen and graduate 380. Where are the kids going? Lots of schools can justify it with all sorts of reasoning of where they went and what they're doing. Bottom line, that's a trend in every high school around the country. We start with large numbers, we graduate less. And we really need to deeply look at how do we sustain more, because the school board's job is to run a budget and sustain growth, yet it's hard to do when, if we held on to every kid that came to us throughout the years, we wouldn't be in financial crisis each year if we could just sustain keeping more kids. So one way to do that is to get the freshman year, the most critical transition, right. And then the odds of those kids succeeding once they get to their sophomore year exponentially go up. So I'm just going to show you some basic background information. I'm not going to go through all the details that we've been sharing with the board, but I'm going to give you some reviews and just let you know on the district website is all the previous data and the information that we've shared for the decision that was made a few weeks ago. One thing we know is when you look at national statistics and you survey students, if you survey nationally every sophomore, about 80% of them say that they're going to go to college. And that's staggering because we as a nation do not graduate that many kids that go on to college. When you ask freshmen, give or take, about 95–100% say they're going to college. So the bottom line is we do something to freshmen over 1 year, 180 school days that changes their mind. Whether that's other students that they see have stronger skills, whether we bore very gifted kids quickly and they don't see what we're doing is relevant to where they're going. but something happens there where kids already start to retreat based on the vision they had coming into our programs. And that's across the nation, that's not just here. The other thing is that we know that many of the students that we actually get to college, the big trends that are going on is they don't actually show up for a second year, and worse yet, they don't actually get a degree. So we're looking at that, trying to figure out how to fill the hole of where our most gifted are getting out there, and then they're not actually sticking with it. What's going on there? And then last, we know that the constant mantra of go to college and promoting college only isn't working. It's not as strong technique, I think, as implementing some things that help students really plan for their futures and see what that next step is and why that's relevant. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then as a district, between Mount Si and Two Rivers School, we lose about 12% of our student population, which is far better than the state or the nation, but obviously too risky for us as a Snoqualmie Valley to lose that many kids. We wouldn't have the financial constraints we have currently that we're looking at for next year if that 12% were in our school system. So it's obviously financially a big motivator, but also the long-term well-being of those students and the social impacts down the road of them not getting a degree are gigantic. So I want to show you some national trends. This is basically looking at real students in college since 1990, or give or take 1989. And the lines I draw you to is I have you look at the red line first. So these are state colleges across the country, and how many of their students actually come back to a second year of college. And statistically across the nation, it's been flat for 20 plus years. And it's around 70% return for a second year of college. So 30% drop out in their first year of college. If you look at private institution, which give or take are the brightest, most gifted students, their trends are even more problematic. The most gifted, the most skilled, are decreasing over 20 years and sticking with the second year of college. So even the brightest kids are going on to college and not seeing any relevancy because the mantra has been go, 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 and once they get there, it's kind of like, this feels just like high school. They asked me to do stuff, I jumped through hoops, I'm not quite sure why I'm doing this. And there could be lots of reasons. People could argue it's the recession, it's the economy, but bottom line, we think it's because kids are getting there and not seeing it as a positive connection to where they're trying to get. The kids still don't have a clear picture of what's the next step. And I think a lot of us in the room that have a college degree acknowledge that. Some of us rolled into our junior year saying, you know, I better graduate, pick a degree, and just move forward. Okay, and so we think that's a trend that we got to really look at. When you look at our district, these are real students, real Social Security numbers, and our actual graduates. From 2003 to last school year, 2010 or the year before, we have a positive growing trend as a district getting kids into college. In fact, I would argue when those schools and neighboring places we're often compared to, we're growing, they are flat. So one of the positive trends when you look at our lowest dip to the top is, 23%, 26% gain in kids going on to college is massive growth. And there's lots of reasons for that. That could be when the Ridge came in, that could be all sorts of reasons, but the positive trend is the communication of the staff at the high school, the work the middle schools are doing. We're seeing kids look at college as a more viable option as the years go on. Down here you've got private schools, this is our public, and that's basically the combination of both, in case you're wondering what the three lines were. When you look at our students that return their second year, our real data on our students, it's about 81% on average that actually come back for a second year of college. What we now know is nationally, statistically, in 4 years, only about 38% of students actually get a degree. So unfortunately for you guys showing up with cash, plan on a 5th year. And obviously when we look at how many students graduate over 6 years, it's only 58%. So one of the big misnomers of most families in the valley is if I just get my kid there, it will happen. What we're now realizing is few of them, half of them, actually get a degree. So the other thing that we're starting to recognize too is when you look at 2-year schools, the actual average is far worse. So it's actually changing our dialogue with students. A lot of students are looking at a two-year school simply because of finances. And we're realizing that that's a poor decision because statistically, those kids certainly do not get degrees and certainly do not come back the second year. It's almost around 60% on average. So we're really now starting to talk to kids about, tell us why the finance is an issue. And we're digging deeper and finding out that many families just don't know the resources, the financial benefits of a degree, how quickly those loans get paid back. The more we dialogue with students, the more students are going, oh, well then I'll look for a four-year option. So we're realizing again, we haven't done a strong enough job of really teaching families and students how to navigate the system and what the benefits are to go for it big early. But obviously, a lot of these kids are the ones that have not made a clear plan for the future, so they're going to kind of try a two-year school. That's something we got to work harder at to really get them motivated for what the plan is. So one of the things that happened is several years ago, we brought in a group of people that came and did a comprehensive study of the high school program. They came up with recommendations, and the focus originally, I think, I wasn't there, was we have a capacity issue, let's start to think about what we're going to do about it. And what came out of it was, we have a freshman issue, what are we going to do about that, and let's solve that. If we solve freshmen, then some of our other issues will be alleviated. So I think the group went in with one plan and kind of exited with a different plan. And it solved capacity, but they became much more aware of the issue with our freshmen. And they came up with several recommendations. One is, you need systematic interventions. You folks and your students going to Twin Falls have a primary vision of what that would look like. The enrichment program Twin Falls has implemented is very much what they say is important for freshmen at the high school level. It'd be important for any kid all the way up through college. And so that's kind of an idea of what do they mean by a systematic intervention. How are we going to intervene for our most capable kid down to our kid that struggles the most? The second is we need advisories. Advisories is a model where in the day, in the week, or in the month, or in the year, you have an intensive program to help families and students navigate the system and clearly understand why the coursework they're doing is important, how a transcript works, what a credit is, what the colleges want, what minimum requirements are, how do you fill out a financial aid form. All of that would be covered in a program like that to really help the kids understand why am I doing this, where am I going, and obviously intensive effort on what are the career options out there. As the state has implemented more and more requirements, those sort of conversations for teachers have kind of disappeared. Counselors, their entire focus now is really on the other end, which is making sure kids got the right stuff to get into college, ensuring that they got the right letters to get there. We're now really realizing that we need to back up a bit and make sure that kids have a clear picture of what are the career options, what is in demand, why would I want to go to college to try and solve that. The other one is we really feel strongly that some sort of team teaching where teachers in a smaller group really know their students. Obviously in a school of almost, 1,500 students, really hard for everyone to know every kid there. Every big comprehensive school is trying to break down that, personalize it, and make it feel smaller. So lots of the new high school designs are in advisories or in academies based on a pathway of where a student is going. And that would be a similar approach to the freshman campus, is to try and make sure that the teachers serving a certain population really deeply know them, know their needs, and can figure out the best way to intervene earlier before students start to fail coursework and have their permanent transcript affected. So I think everyone kind of realizes that the 4 years of high school, they're most critical. It's a permanent record. It's what they're competitively based on, and that record has to be right off the bat. And you can look at transcripts. You can do what we call a transcript review. Most juniors and seniors figure it out too late because they've already had a freshman experience that makes it very hard to get their GPA up to where they become competitive. And the competitiveness for some of the schools locally has just gotten really, really challenging, especially with the focus of our university starting to look non-domestically at the student population for the dollars they generate. So our kids are having to really have exceptional GPAs and SAT scores in order to get to some of our local four-year high schools. And then STEM is a great buzzword right now: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. What we know when you look at the next 20 years for the career demand is you need to be in the health industries, you need to be in the computer science industries, or you need to be in the biotech industries. And in the Seattle metropolitan area, that's a no-brainer. That's exactly what students need to be doing, because about a fourth of all the jobs available currently and in the next 20 years will be in that sector. We don't pump out that many students that are even capable of entering those sort of programs in college, and most students have avoided it like the plague. We haven't until recently started to require mathematics all 4 years of high school. Most kids up until the last few years only needed 2 years. Now they have to get to Algebra 2, and now we're saying you need to take a senior level math. So we're seeing some really difficult challenges. For example, our high-end math classes don't look like what they used to look like 2 years ago, because now every kid's in there. So what used to be the elite, top-of-the-line kind of college-bound kid is now diverse, and the teachers are really struggling keeping the bar high, pushing kids forward, because the demand and rigor of those courses is way up. So we know we have to address that at an earlier age, and we know the model and traditional math and science programs just are not creating the demand in those upper level courses. Not that we've done something wrong, but what we've been doing for so long, we know the results we've been getting, and it's around 70% kids going on to college. We have to do something different to increase their interest in those programs, and we think the way to do it is to attach it through a deep system of having all students experience rich science, technologies, engineering, and mathematics sort of emphasis in all of their coursework, and I'll show you how that would attach at the freshman campus. We also think probably the strongest thing that would come out of the experience is they will run their own campus. They'll be the high school, but they're going to have autonomy as 500 students to be their own school leaders with their own programs, to implement many of their own assemblies and their focus, freshman specific. They'll have experiences at the high school, but we think them leading their own school is going to raise the bar of their self-confidence. They won't be, kind of suppressed by upperclassmen, by students that have a stronger voice, a louder voice. They'll be able to kind of float to the top and start to manage their own system before they move into the freshman year. The one thing we know about freshmen is they are very different. The growth over a summer to their sophomore year is dramatic. And what we know is that the students coming to us are very much kind of in that limbo land, and it's a hard transition to really get them up to speed with the level of rigor that the high school demands and the pace that the high school demands to keep up. And so we know if we don't get that right, that's a big challenge for us to keep them moving down the pipeline. And then there's lots of examples of what would be the promising practices. Some of those we've already mentioned in the above. But they're looking for teaching at this campus to be different. We're going to actually not take what we're doing wholeheartedly at the high school and just move it to a campus. We actually have to do what we're doing and deliver it in a different manner. So lots of the focus of parents right now is just, is my kid going to get all these options? And the original answer is absolutely. However, we also think that what they do get, we got to change how we deliver it in order for more and more students to move up. And I'll show you a picture of what that looks like. And then obviously the biggest drawback with reforming high schools, every other school system up until high schools has kind of an interdisciplinary approach. If you're an elementary teacher, you teach all the subjects. That's your role. We've gotten to move a little bit more towards this reading specialist in music and PE. Once you get all the way to the high school, that's it. I'm a Spanish teacher, that's what I do. And my department talks about world language issues. It's much more difficult to tackle the whole student population when people are broken down into what we call silos. Very hard to break that down, because most teachers are only endorsed to teach one thing. And so it's very hard to get to deeper levels of collaboration over the big picture when we're in those silos. When we move to a freshman campus, we're really looking at basically teams of folks that aren't just focused on their subject area, but more on the student. And the center of the focus is the student, and how are they doing? How do we collaborate to raise the bar for all of the kids that we're actually sharing in this population? So when that study came out, the time they're running a bond, we had built new portables, we had people on the portables. They did this big shift, and they said, let's use the portables until we actually get to SMS, and let's try and create a freshman campus early. So the first physical thing they did is they started moving freshmen into our, I think it's 9 portables out in the parking lot. And the second half of that was intensive professional development on what are we going to do differently. And the first place we started is basically consistency in demands, consistency in expectations, consistency in communication of how are we going to love these kids differently. And we got about a 50% drop in Fs right off the bat over 2 years. And the one thing you want to watch is you want to watch 9th graders and what did they do the next 10th grade year. And we saw continued evidence that the kind of welcoming approach, the consistency in how we address these students continued to sustain the same efforts, even when the 10th grade teachers were not the same population. So we saw a dramatic improvement. And the second year, which would have been last year, we weren't able to sustain this kind of separate the freshmen out there in the portables. Things happened. We had to move people based on demand because we ran out of space at the high school. Now we had to mix the population of students so they weren't all segregated. Once people retire, resign, move on, sometimes you have to ask somebody that was strictly LA to now you're LA and a Spanish teacher. And so the model kind of broke down because the kids were all still mingling. And we still have been able to sustain some level of success, obviously much more dramatic than the previous couple of years. And one thing to honestly point out is that could be related to many things. That could be related to how good a job the middle schools are doing and sending us better and stronger students, more prepared. And it could be a lot to do with the intensive kind of focus those staff went into to engage in their conversation for how to address their needs particularly. So a little bit about kind of some of the trends. We can look at where all the math or where all the failures are. Some of the things that I have said publicly have kind of been distorted a little bit. We know that, for example, one of the biggest Fs is things like world language. And I want to reiterate every chance I get in front of the public to hear what my message has been. If your student is a strong math student, then definitely consider world language the first year of high school. If your student is a weak math student, those are both strong vocabulary programs. I'd probably postpone it a year. Most parents are under the impression you need 4 years of world language. Yeah, you probably would if you're going to Stanford and Yale, and your kid's going to be highly, highly competitive. If those aren't realistic goals for you and your student, then 3 years is plenty, 2 is the minimum to get into those programs. The more you get, the more competitive you are. Keep in mind that baseline competitiveness is a SAT score and a GPA. So your kid can show lots of great coursework, but if it affects their overall GPA because they're struggling, you've just kind of shot yourself in the foot. Okay? So it's not so much about coursework, because in the end it comes down to a GPA score and an SAT score. They combine the two, they come up with an index score, and that's the first step. Sure, if your kid compares to these two kids, they're going to start looking at details of what your student is doing. The colleges have shifted a lot on what their focus is. They're doing more of a holistic file review than just strictly data, and that's a good thing for our kids because we're starting to see kids that have shown perseverance, maybe have grown from their freshman year and get stronger as they go. That's the sort of stuff colleges are realizing. It's not good business for colleges to lose all those sophomores. So they too are starting to look at models like we are to figure out, well, what sort of students persevere that second, third, fourth year and get degrees, and they're seeing the kids that are growing and pushing. This was just to show you that one group of freshmen went up as sophomores, sustained the same reduction in Fs. So some of the questions we have been addressing, this is the last set of questions we addressed at the board meeting. We wanted to show them a little bit about what are they currently taking, what would the day in life kind of look like, and go into more specifics about the data of failing. So I'm just going to show you some of the quick ideas of what freshmen do currently. Typical freshman takes math, language arts, integrated science, physical ed, and 2 electives. The model at the freshman campus we haven't ironed out, because that's going to take a group of people really interacting and looking at the teacher bodies that will come with us to that campus that want to sustain the philosophy. We're looking for kid magnets. We're looking for people that have wholeheartedly embraced the concept of the philosophy. Then we build the schedule out of that. The biggest concern I've heard from parents is, yeah, but don't screw up my college-bound sort of kid. And the honest answer is, we're not going to get in the way and impede from that population, but I'll show you what a big intensive focus is for that campus. So this gives you an idea that kids take LA. You'll notice we have roughly 180, or half our population take regular LA, and the other half takes honor LA. As you move down, you start to see the sort of math courses. Predominantly our students enter taking algebra. Some go into geometry, and some go into honors geometry. When you look at these populations, the number of honors fades once you go into the math. So this focus of STEM is the critical piece. Many families and students consider themselves an honor level writer, or they should be in an honors program, but they are not in honors levels mathematics. Obviously the issue for us in a region that needs strong mathematics and science students. So one of the things we're doing is the middle schools are already beginning to move and implement more rigorous math earlier, pushing more kids into rigorous math earlier. And I anticipate by the time we open the freshman campus, we'll see numbers in the geometry area go up. And we'll start to see outliers like students in Algebra 2 already as a freshman start to go up. So the positive thing is when we start to look at the teams at the freshman campus, I anticipate we'll have higher numbers of kids that will start to balance out with this honors number, and we'll be able to produce kind of a honors track sort of team category of what we're trying to accomplish there. This is just to show you again that we have other trends. They take integrated science, they take PE, and then a growing trend is also the virtual academy. One reason I show that data is just to remind people, even on a campus that may not have access to some things people thought, the virtual brings access to everything. So if we don't offer a particular thing, one way to get there is a virtual lesson. We're seeing the biggest growth trend, obviously, in secondary education, colleges. Online learning is massive. All those schools are really scrambling. So one consideration is, do we give a kid a taste early to get them exposed to that environment? That's a concept. We'll definitely have virtual options for students at the freshman campus. So one of the things the board wanted to know is, well, tell us about the electives and will you be offering those at the freshman campus? This just shows you, when you look at all of our freshmen, what are they taking? And I only put on this classes that have 25 more students, 25 freshmen that are taking that elective or more. And this is it. So realistic option is if you have 25 kids, you can offer a section of something, because it's going to take that many to generate the staffing for that. And you'll notice I highlighted 4, because one of the things I've heard out in the community is they're not going to be offering world languages. We will definitely offer the world languages at the freshman campus. And the question is, all 4 or 3? We'd have to look at the demand of the students coming out of the 8th grade experience when we get closer to that, to see what that group of freshmen is really looking for. And it gives you ideas of what some of the other electives are that are hot. One of the things I've shared publicly is, these may be hot because this is the only access freshman I've ever had. The high school is going to have to change and adjust. So one of the things is, this may be what they were taking because that's what they had available. Could that change exponentially for us if we created a blank slate of options for freshmen? And we think it would, and I'll show you an example of what. These are the other courses that freshmen take for electives. You can notice that the numbers start to shrink as far as interest. And the example I've been using is, most people want to know, will they get access to all that? Will they get welding at the freshman campus? And the honest answer is probably not. But what we are talking about doing is taking some of these packages and building them into a much more fast-paced experience. So instead of sitting in a course for 90 or 180 days, we break it into 9-week rotations, increase the experiences for kids, because the whole freshman year should be lots of experiences with different careers and ideas to help them shape what are their interests, what are their passions. And so I picked these 4 as an example of what would be a STEM foundation sort of program. If we have a lot of kids that are taking digital image or kind of photography sort of stuff, animation, engineer, design, and computer academy, we can package those into one elective that kids rotate through on a fast basis and get exposure to all of those. So there are a variety of ways that we can accomplish comprehensive elective options for students in a way that we can get more kids through it at a rapid pace to get experiences. And then the day in the life, most of us build a master schedule based on what we would call struggling learners, kind of middle of the bell curve, and kind of the high flyers or high achievers. And right now, it kind of gives you an idea of what they take in their day. So a high flyer would take LARs or honors geometry/geometry, something like that, integrated science, PE, and electives. And I highlighted PE because that's a deep discussion for the team that's going to come to that high school. Do we require PE for 9th graders? Because if we're really going to focus on a STEM concept, if we're really going to focus on raising the bar for mathematics, engineering, science, maybe this becomes one of those experiences in their day, that we rotate them through something that has lots of variety and exposes them to a different sort of math or science experience that can get kids really buying in. So most of STEM is built around the concept that we take a real world problem and kids work towards solving the problem, whether that be, I've used the wind turbine as an example. Is it the length of the blade, the degree of the blade, the shape of the blade? What is it about the blade that produces the most power? And your team has to design that system. And over a period of time, that's sort of the focus those kids are working on. The hope is we'll generate kids that are much more interested in math and science when they realize when it's all done and over, that was math, that was science. So kids can re-engage to realize that those careers are out there, and that's something they should look at. That was fast. So I had that back there going. So that kind of gives you an overall glimpse. It's not that we don't have a clear picture of what we want to do. The clear picture has to come from community. We are already beginning to talk to 6th and 7th graders. Obviously, my high school students is where my focus is, in the sense that I think the strongest voice that is often ignored is the student voice. So we're already talking to high school kids about how would that be different and how would that suck if you were over there compared to here. And they're starting to give us really strong feedback already about if you're going to do it, here's the right way to do it. And they're already really engaging on how would we make sure that those freshmen that end up there first are really happy to be there. So keep in mind, a lot of my high school students that are involved with me have current 6th and 7th grade brothers and sisters. They're already having those discussions. So our leadership team's really working on that deeply right now. So that's kind of in a nutshell, what we're looking at. Kind of open the floor for questions and see if